Well, I got a confession to make, and the confession comes around, preaching itself. If you know me well, you know I'm kind of a reluctant preacher anyway. Like, it took me a long time to get here because of whatever reasons I have. I think one of the reasons is it feels so important to me that if you're a pastor, that you really are really filled with what God wants you to be filled with so that you can give it out. And then, the other reluctance is, you try to be authentic. And so if you try to be authentic, are you really being authentic? You ever thought about that? And so then the other problem is when you begin to study something and preach something, it has a tendency to jump on you. And you begin to think, I should have this a little more under control if I'm going to be explaining it to people. And so a lot of times when you begin to study some particular subject, you begin to think, wow, how am I doing? And you go introspective, which is always not a fun thing. I mean, it's always an important thing, just not a fun thing. And so we're in the book of Philippians, and we're talking about joy. And the thing that we talked about initially is that joy is an inside job, and certainly joy is an inside job. It's something that it's a journey we have to take inwardly to get to it. And so as I began to study it, guess what I've had such a difficult time finding? Joy. About the time you begin to really study something, then all the circumstances of life begin to start pounding on you, and things begin to happen to you. And it's like, have you ever prayed for patience? Yeah, I mean, there's another stupid prayer. I mean, then God starts bringing things in your life, and you got to be patient over it. Well, it's the same thing with joy. I've had the most aggravating, sorry week I think I've had in a long time. We're not just, I was disappointed in a couple of people, I was disappointed in like the world. You know what I'm talking about? And just having that, and then going back and now looking at it, and if Donna were honest, I've sworn her to secrecy, but she'll tell you I've been a pistol all week. And, we went away and had a great time away and got back, and I was all rested, and I guess it was because I got back and realized, no, my world's fairly aggravating, and I've not found a whole lot of joy lately. And I'm thinking, why is that? Well, I think one of the major reasons is the enemy doesn't want you to hear this. He doesn't want you to hear it from a fresh heart. He doesn't want you to hear it from somebody who's got it all going on. Some preachers do. I'm not one of those. I got it all going on, but it's all going on all over the place. And so the idea is that I realize the enemy is on attack, and that's a great thing. I am thrilled with that, but I want to just admit to you, I'm fighting through that. And it's not an easy fight. And so I think that's more of a I'm fully assured this is what we're supposed to be doing because the enemy's on it. So today I'm talking about living the legacy you want to live. Or you want to leave. A lot of people think about leaving their legacy, but they think about what they're going to leave behind. And the truth is, if you want to have a great legacy, have it while you're here. And you got time to make adjustments to it. You got time to make it what it ought to be. You ought to be living your legacy out now. The Declaration of Independence states that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's wonderful in the Declaration of Independence. But in God's economy, happiness isn't something that you and I are pursuing. We don't have to chase after happiness. Because what the world is talking about when it's talking about happiness is that something comes to you that feels pleasant or feels good, whether it's a person or a feeling or a thing, and you enjoy that whatever it is that is coming to you, and that makes you happy. Have you noticed, though, that the things that come to you that are supposed to make you happy don't make you all that happy? Or they make you happy for a minute. And after a minute, what are you going to do then? Okay, I'm going to take a chance. You are all watching the NCAA play. Right?
UMBC.
God forgive them. For the first time in the history of college basketball, a number 1 seed fell to a 16 seed. UNCB. Nobody knew who they were. Matter of fact, their website crashed because people started looking for them on the website. It's just a bunch of young kids who the first of the season lost 10 in a row. Okay? And so now they come up against Virginia, supposed to be the biggest, baddest team in the last decade, and they beat them. Now, we knew this was going to happen eventually, just didn't think it was going to happen then. And you talk about joy. They got joy, they got happy. You know what the greatest problem is going to be? Besides your bracket. Yeah. But the greatest problem is going to be for that coach to get those guys off that happy high, because guess what they get to do today? Play again. And when they're talking to the coach, he said, I'm trying to get them to forget the win. And all it is, everybody's talking about it. But my point is that happiness will go away. And yet the sorrow that Virginia felt in the loss will be with them for a long, long time. Happiness is fleeting. And when you get it from the outside, when it comes at you from the outside, and you get it and it feels all warm and fuzzy, that's great, enjoy it. Because most of that feeling is gone within just a few seconds. Drug addicts, if you've ever done any work with anybody who has struggled with drugs, they are chasing not the euphoria of a high, they are chasing what it felt like the first time they did it. And when you begin to understand that, you start to understand why it multiplies on them, why they keep trying to do more and more and more, because they're looking for that first euphoric feeling they had that first time they tried drugs. And you only have that once. So happiness comes and goes. But that's not joy. And joy isn't something that's out there for us to be reaching at. It's not something that we're going to one day just find and go, oh, there it is. It's a lifestyle. It's an inner journey for you and I. And it's one that we have to choose to take on a daily basis. It's not one of those things that you come in and you say, I got the joy. And then every time we see you from that, you're going to have the joy. Not unless you're doing the work. So Paul is teaching this Philippian church. He's talking about how joyful they have made him, and people can make him joyful, and it's wonderful when they do. But he is expressing how to understand, to make that inner journey so that you and I can have joy. And that's what he's teaching. In the 4th chapter, which we will get to eventually, he talks about our thoughts. And if you're going to find joy, you're going to have to find it in your thought processes. And in 4:8, this verse says, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And Paul is telling us, you got to get your mind right. You got to get your thinking squared away. I mean, have you ever just looked at somebody and say, boy, you're outside your mind? Because their thinking isn't right. We got to get our thinking focused. And it's so hard to get our thinking focused because everything that comes at us that we're advertised to grab or get that's going to make us happy is pushing against us, right? And we think, oh, if I get that, I'll be happy. If I get that, I'll be happy. And Paul's saying, no. I think what he's saying is you got to go all Forrest Gump. Right? Remember Forrest? He's just a joyful guy. Run, Forrest, run. Okay, he takes off and he runs forever. You know? And the antithesis of him was Captain Dan, Lieutenant Dan. You remember? I mean, the funniest part of the movie is Lieutenant Dan had lost his legs, and he was so mad at Forrest Gump because Forrest Gump saved him, and he was supposed to die on the field, and all of that. And so he finds Forrest out shrimp boating, and he's got no legs and nowhere to go, and so he goes shrimp boating with Forrest Gump. And there's a major, major storm. And in the storm, all you can see is Lieutenant Dan up in the catbird seat. And he's cursing God. And in the movie, you just hear all this gibberish kind of language, and he's screaming, and the lightning's shooting around him. And Forrest Gump underneath says, well, I think that day Lieutenant Dan made his peace with God. Got all that anger out. Got it all done. So I want to give you just kind of a pattern in terms of what it means to have a positive mindset. And when I say positive mindset, I'm not talking about, pumping you up and making you feel good about yourself. I love motivational speakers, and they get you out there and they get you going, and then, you run out in the parking lot and you don't know which Ford White Escort you belong to, and you're so fired up. It doesn't last. It doesn't last. But what lasts is a positive mindset as opposed to a negative mindset. And this is real good at helping you figure out which of these do I have. Look over at the negative mindset. The negative mindset has a need for certain things before there will be joy. If you have a negative mindset, that's the way you're thinking. If only I could do this, if only I could get here, if only I could have that, if only this would come to me or that would come to me, then I'd be happy. I remember when I worked for Levi Strauss, I started out as a stock taker, and I remember working for guys, and they were salesmen, and I thought, if I could ever be a salesman, man, I'd be totally satisfied. That would be the bomb. And then they came to me one day and said, you want to be a salesman? Yeah. So I was a salesman. And then amongst the salesmen, I saw account managers. They didn't have to travel as much, and I said, man, if I could just be an account manager, that'd be awesome. That'd be the best thing in the world. And then I got to be an account manager. But then I learned about account executives. And I thought, if I could just be one of them, that would be perfect. And then I got to be an account executive. And then I started thinking, if I could be regional manager. And they asked me to move to Chicago and be a regional manager. And I said, oh, no way. That's not going to bring joy. But I figured out by then everything that I ascribed to and everything that I was running at to fulfill me, and none of it really does. If you don't get it from the inside out, it's not coming. If it's not coming from the Lord, from God, and it's not just that wonderful joy that He gives, it's not going to happen. The second thing in a negative mindset is you have strong dependence on others to provide joy. You're counting on the people around you. Think about that. You're counting on the sinners around you to bring you joy. And they're counting on you, and you're as bad a sinner as they are, and you're going to bring them joy. And you start counting on people. You know what the very middle verse of the Bible says? It says, don't trust in people, trust in God. Significant God will put that in the middle. It's Psalm 89 or something. And the idea is that when you start putting your trust and you start putting the value that you have for life into another person, and the expectation is that they're going to do something wonderful that's going to make you happy. Not going to happen. When I counsel couples, you know what I tell them? They're all upset at each other. They're in trouble, and they look at me and they say, well, what can we do right now? And I said, you really want to know? I mean, you want this to go a whole lot better? Yeah. You want it to go a whole lot better immediately? Yeah. I said, okay, take your expectations from here and drop them to about here, and you'll be fine. Because they're both expecting that other person to bring something into them that's missing that only God can fill. It is only the joy of the Lord that is going to take care of that. And when you find the joy of the Lord, and the person you're in a relationship with has that same similar kind of joy, then you're making God happy. And you will automatically be happy in that process. The next thing about those who have a negative mindset is their focus, I can barely read this. They're focusing on joy as being out there, always coming toward them, and they're waiting basically for their ship to come in. And let me just help you out. Whatever ship you had coming in sank years and years and years ago. There's no ship coming in. There's no special thing that's going to come to you except that which comes from the Spirit of God. Once you have the Lord Jesus in your heart and you understand that, that is what comes to you. Now look at the positive mindset. The positive mindset has need for nothing tangible for them to be joyful. There's not anything that I need to add to me that's going to add any more joy than what I already have. And that allows you to hold the things that you have with an open hand. There's no amount of money that has to come to me before I'm joyful. I'm just joyful. And Paul would say that I've learned how to abound, and I've learned how to abase, I've learned how to live on nothing, and I've learned how to live in the penthouse. The idea is that you don't need that. It's nice when you get it. I like the old champion Joe Louis. One time they asked him about money, if it was important to him. He said, well, it's not all that important, but it sure does calm my nerves when I have it. So the idea is that you're not waiting for something to come to you to be joyful. Then the ability to create your own reasons for joy. When you can look around and begin to have joy in what it is that you have, and then instead of looking around at what somebody else has that you wished you would have. Does that make any sense? You know, I grew up in Southern California, and if you grew up and you didn't have a cool car, you might as well move to Arizona. Seriously, I mean, it was bad. And I got over having a cool car. Just got over it. I tell you what got me over it, I had 2 boys. And when they turned 16, we were either going to drive a really nice car or buy insurance. And so everybody but Mama drove junk. That's just the way that goes. And so I got into junky cars. And I got to where I love buying an old junky car and just seeing how long I can make it go. And you know, I remember I had one little, I bought a little BMW, and it was beautiful. I mean, cute little car, little, you know, 328i or whatever the thing was, and, you know, beautiful on this side. You just had to always walk up on that side. And then you walk around front and get in, and you don't look at the back right rear of the car, you just ignore it. Because it had a couple dents. Well, I actually had one big massive dent that probably kept the back door from coming open. But, you know, the idea was it was a great car. And I was thankful to have it. And then that little car, because of the BMW, BMWs just do things, and then you can't fix them unless you take them back to BMW land. And this little car, you'd be driving along and be doing great, and it would go. And when it did that, you had, maybe 10 seconds to get over the side of the road. Because it was going to quit. It was going to rest. And you had no idea how long it was going to rest. And I used to be resting on the side of the road, getting tensed up and angry, and you know, and then I started discovering, man, this is some quiet time for me. This is a nice interruption to my otherwise frantic, chaotic day. So every time I hear that little noise, I go, okay, rest time, you know. And it had a nice little seat. You could roll it back, take a nap, you know, you could study, do whatever you're going to do. It also made me get to things earlier, start to go earlier, because you never knew. I might be going to do a wedding. And if it was going to do, I needed a few minutes to have the rest before I got to the wedding. So I was getting places early. You got to have a right mindset. Then the other positive thing is choosing joy now and making it a present pursuit. You know, renewing yourself every day and put yourself in a place where you can understand and have joy. And it's not an easy thing to do. There's a guy named Major James Nesmith. Major James Nesmith did something very interesting. He was captured in the Vietnam War, and he was put in a concentration camp where he stayed for 7 years. And he realized if he didn't do something with his mind, he was going to go crazy. And here he was in this little cage, and being treated like a prisoner of war. And so what he decided to do, he was an average golfer. And so he decided he would go golfing every day in his mind. That he would shut himself off, and instead of think about his situation in his cramped quarters, he would close his eyes and he would picture himself at the tee box of some golf course that he loved. And he'd picture himself taking his swing. And he'd picture the ball going wherever the ball was going to go. And then he would walk to the ball and decide what club is he going to use next. He would play golf in his mind the whole day long. After 7 years, when he was released from prison, first thing he wanted to do was golf. When he went out and played golf the first time, he shot a 74.
Wow.
He shaved 20 points off of his game just by having positive thoughts about that thing. Every great athlete that I know anything about knows how to close their eyes and see themselves achieving something and then achieving it. It's not a bad way to think about your faith, to close your eyes and envision yourself as a person filled with great joy. I mean, I close my eyes and I begin to ponder my life, and am I full of great joy? And then I realize, no, I'm fairly aggravated right now, and that's not good, and why am I aggravated, and what am I going to do about it? But if I can just close my eyes and have a picture of joy, begin to think about what would that look like in me? What would it look like if I was walking around in joy? What would my words sound like? What would my actions be? How different would they be from what they are? And you begin to visualize that, and God will allow that to happen in your life, because that's what God has for us. He has a life of joy. God said, I came that you might have joy, and you might have it everlasting. And so I want to take us to a great example of joy. This is the DIY model of how to live. The Apostle Paul. Now, Paul wanted to go to Rome. That was his goal. He wanted to get to Rome because he wanted to get before the Caesar, and he wanted to talk about Christianity. He was, in fact, a Roman citizen, and so traveling to Rome was no big deal. But before he could get to Rome, he gets arrested in Jerusalem. He had made his plan, but before he can do his plan, he gets arrested in Jerusalem, and he gets wrongly charged. And then he gets put on a boat as a prisoner to be taken to Rome, and that's a dangerous water up that Mediterranean river, and they try to stay close to the coastline because they're known for great storms. And of course a great storm comes, and we know from Scripture, we read it in Corinthians, I've spent a day and a night in the sea. The boat crashes. And many of the people on the boat die. He thinks he's going to die. Matter of fact, back in Corinthians he said, I prayed that I'd die. That would have been easier. But he survives, and he ends up in a jail, incarcerated over nothing that was his fault, and he's chained to a Roman soldier. And so that's the situation he's in, and here he is writing a book back to the Philippian church about joy. How do you write about joy when you're in prison? How do you do that? Why would you do that? You see, he's giving us such an outstanding example. So beginning in verse 12 through 14, it says, Now I want you to know, my brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped to spread the good news. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, knows that I am in chains because of Christ. And because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly speak God's message without fear. So, nothing happened the way he wanted to happen. He had it all planned out. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He was going to head to Rome. He was going to begin to engage people on the street. He was going to get in these large debates, and they were going to draw great big crowds. He had it all in his head what was going to happen, and nothing that he wanted to happen happened the way he wanted it to happen. So, and here he is in prison for no reason. He's the victim. He's the guy that they're taking advantage of. So instead of writing about that, he writes to them and says, well, everything that's happened is God's will. I got arrested wrongly. I got shipwrecked. Now I'm in Rome and I'm a prisoner. It's a God thing. You didn't think I was ever going to use that again, did you? That's what I'm trying to tell you, that whatever thing it is, it's a God thing. And he was so full of joy that he recognized, this is the way God wants to work it out. I'm good. I'm good with that. And then he said, it's actually worked out better, because in his head, he saw himself as the voice. He saw himself as the only guy that could go deliver that message. He saw that he had to be the one to stand up and be the bold one. But now, because he's in prison, he can't do any of that. But the believers that are there are now beginning to do that. You see, God had a better plan, and they became emboldened. And when we say that, the church at Rome, we get a little lost, because when you say the church in Rome, and many of you that travel to Rome, you go see great big churches in Rome. Well, not in the first century. The Christian church in Rome was very small. It had 2 or 3 people in a house, and they were very frightened about being arrested. And they had several house churches, and sometimes they would get together, but not very often. It'd be much like what we're seeing now in Iran, where you have house churches and they communicate on the internet. But they didn't have all that. And so they were frightened and hunkered down and scared to death. And Paul's saying, hey, all this stuff that happened to me, it's empowered them. I'm so excited. They now have confidence. They're walking up to people and sharing the gospel. There was no way we were going to get there without this kind of persecution. And I've got joy. So he's saying they're out there sharing the good news. So he's excited for them. Then, the next thing that happens, he is joyful in spite of others. Because no matter what your situation is today, you got others in your life, right? You got others, and you have others. So Paul has talked us the others. Now he's going to talk about the others. They're just things and people and all that as you go through life that just are going to be disappointing, and they just get to you. And you know what it's like. You know what it's like when you have an expectation somebody's going to do something and they do something completely different, and you're disappointed. If you've ever been a parent, you know exactly what that's like. You have these expectations, and all of a sudden you look and it's not happening, and decisions are being made that you don't agree with. Then you go to work, same thing happens at work. There's others there, and they want to do something different. You can't seem to get it going. You can't get it going down the right track. And you come to church, and there's others in church, and then you try to get it going, and then you have an others experience. Come on. Paul had that. And he teaches us right here how to handle all that. And if we're going to handle all that, we need to handle it the way that he did, and we will find joy. Beginning in 15 through 18, it says, it's true that some are preaching out of jealousy and rivalry, but others preach out of Christ and a pure motive. And they preach because they love me, and they know that I have been appointed to defend the good news. Those others do not have pure motives, as they preach about Christ, and they preach with selfish ambition, not sincerely intending to make my chains more painful to me. But that doesn't matter. Whether their motives are false or genuine, the message about Christ is being preached either way, so I rejoice, and I will continue to rejoice. Now what has happened is, Paul gets there, and there are some reluctant preachers, and they begin to preach because they love Paul, and they love the message, and they've got this bold confidence now, and so they begin to preach. And then there's another group that preach because Paul is in prison, and so they're thinking, yeah, now we can take over and have the fame and all that Paul has, and everybody thinks Paul's so sharp. We will come up next, and they're jealous of him, and they begin to preach with the wrong motive. And you know what Paul says? I don't care. I don't give a rip. I don't care what the guy's motive is. He's preaching the good news. Let him preach. Let him do it with a bad motive. I don't care. I went to the fair one year, and me and a buddy bought a hot tub. and had it, you know, the guy was going to bring it to our houses, and we never saw him ever again. And I began to investigate what happened to my hot tub. And I had a friend on the Dallas Police Department who was a detective, and he found the guy's address. And so I called my buddy. I said, man, I'm going to go get my money back from my hot tub. You want to come? And he said, you're crazy. He said, that guy's a criminal. And I said, I'm going. And Donna's saying, you're crazy. And so she calls my brother, and my brother calls me, and he said, you're crazy. And I said, I'm going. He said, well, I'll go with you. So we drive over there, and I hit this guy's door, making it shake. Just hard as I can. Boom, boom, boom. And, you know, he comes to the door, and he opens the door, he's shocked. And I'm standing there, I go, okay, where's my hot tub? I didn't get my hot tub or my $2,000. How you want to do this? And the guy, he's looking at me, he goes, and I said, you don't remember me? Because I remember you. No, you know, and he's stumbling, fumbling. And now I'm looking around, he's got nothing. I mean, there's an old car in the driveway, and I'm looking in the house, and there's just a card table and a chair, and and I go, you don't have my money, do you? And he goes, no. And I said, wow. And then I went into the gospel, and I said, well, let me ask you something. Do you know for certain if you were to die, you'd go to heaven? And the guy's going, hey, yeah. And I said, no kidding. If you were to stand before God, and he would say, why should I let you in? What would you say? I don't know. And I go through the gospel. And I said, well, God's got a wonderful plan for you. You know, you're a sinner, and that's for sure. You're robbing people hot tubs. And then, you know, and God knows that, and you're off base, and I'm screaming at him, you know. And I said, but, you know, God died for you, and that means you get grace just like everybody else. You don't deserve it. But, you know, and I went through the gospel angry. And I said, so you can pray right now. Is that something you want to do? And the guy's broken, you know, and he kind of looks down and he goes, yes. And I go, yes? So I just turned it over to my brother. Take care of that. And the guy prays to receive Christ, and his wife comes out and she says, I was leaving him today. And my whole church has been praying for his salvation, all the bad things he's done, you know, and I was leaving him this day. And she said, but he's gloriously saved, and our marriage is restored, and she's praising Jesus. And Larry's talking to him, and I'm, you know, really, and I've not mastered joy yet in that situation, you know. And you know, it was great. I was in no way in the right mindset to be God's vehicle. That was done all wrong. But you know what? It was God's word. It wasn't my attitude. And that's what Paul's saying. Now, over in Galatians, there's some guys preaching, and he said, may the curse of God be on any man or any angel who would preach another gospel. Now, people go, well, what's the difference? The difference is you had these jealous guys, but they were preaching the true gospel, and you had these other guys in Galatia that were preaching a false gospel. And so that is the major difference. And he recognized God can take a crooked stick and he can make a straight hit. And I've experienced that. So in spite of others, he finds a way to find happiness. Are you a people pleaser? Because if you're a people pleaser, I just got to tell you, until you recover from that, you're never really going to find joy. Because you're going to find joy, and you're not going to please everybody. And that's okay. I know I'm a recovering people pleaser. Maybe we ought to start a group. Recovering people pleasers. But you don't want to go overboard like, you know, ex-smokers, where they're the worst people to be around. You want to make sure that you kind of understand when other people are trying to please. But if you're trying to please, you're always going to be dissatisfied. Then, the next thing that we find is that he has he's hopefully, what does that say? Thank you. I'm glad you all can see these things. I'm half blind up here. It's because of my age. And, you know, of all the things that have left me over the years, I miss my eyes the most. But he's hopeful regardless of the circumstances. In verse 19 and 20, we see this. He says, "For I know that as you pray for me and the Spirit of Jesus Christ helps me, this will lead to my deliverance. For I fully expect and hope that I will never be ashamed, but that I will continue to be bold for Christ as I have been in the past, and I trust that my life will bring honor to Christ whether I live or die." You know, shame, he is saying shame will not rule the day. There's a lot of things that people are ashamed of. And, you know, as you get older, you know, what happens to us is we regret things. You know, when you're young, you know, you're regretting some things you did. You get a little older, you regret some things you didn't do. But we always seem to have all these regrets, and many times they'll bring shame. They'll bring heartache to you. And shame is an awful thing. It is an art of the enemy that comes against you. So instead of feeling godly guilt, you feel shame. And the difference is when you feel guilty about something, you go, "Oh, wow, I feel guilty about that. I shouldn't do that. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to turn and walk away. I'm going to be different from that." Shame, on the other hand, says, "Wow, look at what I did. These are the kinds of things I always do. If anybody knew I did these kind of things, nobody would even be around me. And so I better keep them a secret." And it eats away at any kind of joy that you might have. And he is saying, I will not be ashamed. I refuse to bring shame to Christ. And the only way I could do that is to bring shame to myself. So I want to live my life in such a way that I am not ashamed. I need a self that I can live with. I need to be able to walk up and look in the mirror and say, that's a self that I can live with. And I'm not going to let shame attack. Now I am going to order my life, and I'm going to have short accounts of things that I do wrong, and there are times when I'm going to feel guilt, and that's okay. I felt guilty after sharing the gospel with that man in that manner. I thought, wow, who the heck am I? Now, when it gets to verse 21, he says, "For me to live means living for Christ, and dying is even better." For me to live is to live for Christ, and for me to die is better. Let me put some other words in there. For me to live is money. To die is to leave it all behind. For me to live is fame. To die is to be forgotten. For me to live is power. To die, to lose it all. For me to live is things. To die is to take none with me. There's no luggage rack on a person. The idea is, he's saying, for me to live is for Christ to live through me. And for me to die is a promotion. For me to die is to know ultimate joy. For me to die is to be out of pain in this life and to be able to move into life everlasting with a loving God who will immediately allow me to feel and understand perfectly the grace of God and what God has for me in all things. And so, you know, Paul has talked about circumstances and its place in joy, or its no place in joy. He's talked about other people and its place in joy, or its no place in joy. And then he's talked about the future and his future. And his future is to live for Christ and to die and be in glory. You have to start there to find joy. That's the beginning place. To die, to accept Jesus as your personal Savior, to figure it out and recognize, yes, God has for me something special and different. So let me just give you 3 things that you need to consider. Right here, there are 3 things. Am I there? Nope. Okay, I'll tell you the 3 things. Did I get there? Yes. Okay, things to consider. The main thing to consider is when you make Christ the center focus of your life, these 3 things are true. The first one is, it broadens the dimensions of our circumstances. Right now, things are happening to you, and you would say, well, yeah, but if you knew what I was going through, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is. It doesn't matter how awful it is. It doesn't matter if it's a cage over in Vietnam and you're in the mud. It doesn't matter. Whatever your circumstance is, the dimensions of it get so broadened when you begin to understand God wants you to have joy. He wants you to have joy regardless of your circumstances. And you've heard people say, well, I'm doing pretty good under the circumstances, and what people have said back, what are you doing under there? You're supposed to right above the circumstances. And you will have circumstances, not all of them pleasant. The second thing, when you make Christ the central force of your life, is people are no longer our preoccupation. I mean, how many of us are just so preoccupied with people? People that love us, people that need our care, people that need care for us. And we're preoccupied with relationships and all that go on with that. And it doesn't mean that you're supposed to step away from any of that, but you're supposed to put Christ at the very center of that. That will empower you to be everything you need to be in any relationship. Because it'll be about Him. And then the third thing is it calms our fears of the future. I guess everybody's afraid to die. But when you begin to understand, for you to live as Christ and to die as gain, you're able to say and mean things like what Billy Graham said. When you hear that I have died, don't believe it. I'm more alive than I've ever been. I am just with Him. You see, all the fear and all the fight and all the things that comes with, trying to stay alive, stay with it, no matter what. And Paul was saying, as long as God leaves me here, it's going to be Christ. And when He takes me away, it's going to be even better. It's going to be even better. Now, certainly death is the last enemy of ours, but death is an enemy in the Christian world only for the living. It is a wound for the living. Not to the one who knows Christ and dies. To the one that knows Christ and dies, it's gain. You're better than you've ever been. You're rejoicing. You're dancing. And one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years in this day. So let's take a shot at joy this week. I want to just give everything we got to ignore the circumstances. Don't try to please the people, but just try to hunker down and allow God to bring great joy in your life. Let's pray. Father, help us. Help us to understand that you long for us to live a joyful life. Not a happy, fulfilled, successful one, but one that is joyful, that has the joy of the Lord in it, that has His presence ever before us. And Father, help us to be that. In Jesus' name, amen.